Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on this fifth session on 3 SME case studies, implementation of a multi-capital model. We have 1 hour to present those 3 case studies and especially to share the experience of the directors of those SMEs. Everyone is listening to me rightly.
It's all fine, Eugénie. It's all fine.
Okay, thank you. So the 3 case studies will be published very soon. You will be able to see specific consideration for each SMEs in those case studies. In this presentation, I will present you how we did the experiment, how we did experiment the model with common threads over the 3 cases. So before we start, please be aware of the conference rules. So as a participant, you should keep your microphone and camera off and use the chat to ask your questions. And for the speakers, please turn on your microphone and camera when you're speaking. So thank you everyone for being here. And now just a quick presentation of the agenda for this session. So first, I will briefly introduce the speakers of this session and myself. Then I will present you the experiment of the Research Center on the 3 SMEs with first an overview of the project, a brief presentation of the methodology we used, then more details on the experiment itself and a presentation of the results and how the experiment contributed to our chair project. After this presentation, we will have a moment for question and answers with the speakers and the audience. So let me first introduce you the 3 panelists. So first we have Nicolas Delange. He's a director and founder of Yever. Yever is a Birman business consulting company helping their clients to make decisions that will build more sustainable and responsible business in Myanmar. They have pro bono activities and invest a lot of time to develop the employability of their employees. Then we have the presence of Mathilde Martelly. She's the financial director of the group Nepsen. It is a French group of eco-energeticists committed in energy sobriety and ecological transition. They help their clients reduce their energy consumption, and they have an expertise on carbon footprint. And then we have Didier Toque. He's the director and founder of Bathô, a shipyard of the social and solidarity economy. They transform pleasure boats out of use into unusual accommodation for tourism, playgrounds, company offices, or individuals. It is a company of the circular economy that helps reuse old non-recyclable boats. They are also committed in professional reintegration and developing employability of their employees. So a big thank you for all of them for accepting to be part of this experiment and of the research center and to be here today sharing their experience with us. And finally, I am Eugénie Faure. I am a former financial auditor, and since 1 year, I have been a PhD student of the University of Nantes in the Research Center of Audencia. I am presenting this session as I was in charge of the first experiment of testing our multi-capital accounting model on the 3 SMEs with Abdellah Baid, who was an intern in our team during 6 months, and that helped us develop the access tool we used for this experiment. Now I'm going to present you a first overview of this experiment. So the project started on October 2020 and ended in March 2021. The aim of this experiment was to test the multi-capital accounting model we were developing on a simplified tool on access with financial and non-financial data from the SMEs. It is using the first version of the LIFTS accounting model, so we are well aware that there are still some elements to improve regarding the KPI we used to account for the environment and the social. So the idea was really to try if we could account for physical data with financial accounting entries and to develop a database and a framework for it. So our team did the experiment and the calculations based on the data of the 3 SMEs, as it is not a direct implementation and experimentation by the SMEs. So we did this in 3 phases. One first phase of interviews to understand activities, business model of the companies, and to determine the indicators to follow. A second phase of data collection, including financial general ledgers and extra financial data. And a third phase of calculation and presentation of the results. So during the 6 months, we developed at the same time the methodology, the access tool, and we tested it at the same time. I will give you more details of the experiment after presenting you the methodology we used for the multi-capital accounting model. So it was just presented in the previous session, so I will present it very briefly for those of you who did not follow the previous sessions. So our model is the LIFTS accounting model for limits and foundation towards sustainability accounting model. It accounts for physical flows with accounting entries inspired by the financial accounting scheme to accumulate physical data on environmental and social indicators. It is integrated to financial accounting systems as physical data like quantity consumed, quantity emitted, quantity bought, etc., are associated to financial accounting entries. So it is a way to facilitate the control of the results obtained with our model. It takes into account an extended accountability of the company, as you have seen, as the performance of the company includes impact from the entire value chain from its suppliers to its customers. The model does not allow to substitute performance between capitals, which means that good results on environmental capital cannot substitute bad results on social capital, for instance. Also, it does not compensate negative impacts with positive impacts. The performance is determined by comparing the physical impacts of the company with budget based on planetary boundaries and social foundations. Richard Jabot is presenting the next session and will come in more details on planetary boundaries and social foundations. Finally, the model presents results in physical units, the unit of the multi-capital accounting entries, but they can be converted into a monetary or non-monetary units, so they can be presented and understood by a wider range of actors. So we started this experiment with interviews with the management of each SME. It was a way for us to understand more deeply the activities of each company, their business model, their engagement and sustainability, and their internal processes. It was a way also to delimit the perimeter of the study to know what was the entity we were accounting for, or what group of entity on the case of the group, and on what period we were testing the LIFTS accounting model. So we tested the model on the legal entities to align our perimeter to the perimeter of financial accounting. In the case of the group studied, we tested the LIFTS accounting model on each entity of the group, and then we cumulated all entities to have the group results. And we focused on the year for which we had availability on financial and non-financial data. Then we obtained several documents and data, including financial statement, financial general ledgers, and non-financial data. So we decided for this first experiment and in discussion with the management of the SMEs to focus on 3 first indicators that were material for the 3 SMEs, which are climate change, income and work, and education. So climate change is a material issue for all companies, and the methodology to account for climate change already exists. That is why for this planetary boundary, we used the carbon footprint methodology and accounted for tons of CO2 equivalent. The budget was defined thanks to the Science Based Targets Initiative tool. For income and work, it's a social foundation that we associated with the living wage. The idea was to account for the number of employees paid above the living wage. The living wage was defined thanks to the wageindicator.org database. We selected the living wage of the country where the SME was operating. So the living wage of Myanmar in the case of Yever, and the living wage of France in the case of Nepsen and Bathô. And the budget is defined by the number of employees the company had during the period. And finally, we defined education for companies as the development of employability. As it is a complex notion for this first experiment, we only accounted for it with the number of hours of training provided to employees. So we are aware of the limits of such an indicator, and we will probably develop it in the next version of the methodology. The budget for it was the minimum number of hours of training a company had to provide to its employees according to the number determined by the French compte personnel de formation. After having determined the KPI to study, we worked on the financial and non-financial documents we obtained from the SMEs to associate non-financial data with financial accounting entries. So we used the carbon footprint previously made by the company when it was available. We also obtained details on salaries of employees and the number of hours of training provided to their employees on the period. When our financial accounting entries were completed with non-financial data on carbon and employees, we uploaded it in the Access tool developed by Abdelhabaid for this experiment. This tool then works like an accounting system and accounted for physical data in non-financial journal entries. We used, as you may have seen in the presentation of the methodology just before, we used accounting scheme with debit and credit and non-financial accounts for the lifts accounting model. So for planetary boundaries, we accounted for carbon emissions in a debt account and in an expense account. For social foundation, we account for hours of training or number of employees paid above the living wage in a receivable account and a revenue account. For both limits and foundation, the entry accounting for the budget is in reverse, which means that the budget is a revenue for the carbon and a debt for the social foundations. It's a way to translate the fact that planetary boundaries are a limited budget, a limited inventory that the company should not use more than it has. That is why it is a stock and a revenue, and emission of the company during the period are a debt and an expense. so that in the end, the net result is the difference between revenues and expenses and is equal to the residual inventory or debt at the end of the period. On the contrary, social foundations are minimum needs to provide to employees. That is why it is accounted as a debt the company has to reimburse during the period. And net result is the difference between the budget in debt and expenses and the employees paid above the living wage as a product and a receivable. And in the end, the net result is equal to the residual debt if there is a debt or equal to zero. If the company does not respect limits of foundation, the company will be indebted. This is the general idea of our first version of the model. The access tool developed accounted for these entries for all SMEs, and we were able to present the results in non-financial statements, inspired by the financial statements with an income statement, a balance sheet, and disclosures for each KPI accounted for. So this is one example for the climate change. On these non-financial statements, so it's not real data from the SMEs. To go quicker, I show you figures number inspired by the 3 case studies you will be able to see in the published case studies. So in these non-financial statements, we can see that the carbon budget provided to the entity was for 135 tons of CO2 equivalent, donc determined by the Science-Based Targets Initiatives tool. And during the period, the company emitted a little more than its budget for 140 tons of CO2, including 110 for its thanks to its operation, because of its operation, and 30 tons of CO2 equivalent because of its supply chain, which result in a negative net result of 5 tons of CO2 equivalent. So the company is indebted for those 5 tons of CO2 in its balance sheet that weren't provided by its budget. And then we need absolutely disclosures to provide explanation on the methodology and the hypothesis used for the budget and how emissions are calculated or estimated, and also to contextualize the results and to give eventually a visual presentation. I will show you in the following slide the prototype that some of you might have seen in the previous session of the presentation of the methodology. Also, it is possible to convert the result into a monetary unit, like we presented earlier with a price for the carbon, or to convert it into another non-financial unit to translate what that result means for the company in terms of going concern, for instance. We did not convert the results on this first experiment, but you can imagine what it could be, thinking about price for the carbon. And the idea is to make it understandable to a wider range of actors and not to include a financial debt in the financial statements of the company. It's a non-financial reporting with no impact on the financial statements of the company. On this one, you can see another example for the foundation income and work. So it's a case of a company paying its employees above the living wage. So the budget is accounted as an expense, and a number of employees paid above the living wage, it appears as revenues. In this case, the company respected the minimum standard to provide to its employees and is not indebted. In that case, We also need to provide disclosures with the non-financial, with the income statement and the balance sheet, to add explanations on methodology and hypotheses used on the budget calculation, and eventually a visual presentation. We could also, in this case, convert the results into a monetary unit, but it was not done for this first experiment. We still need to complete the other perimeters regarding social foundation, like income and work, with generic data when specific data is not available. We only accounted for the pyramid operations for the 3 case studies. So this is the visual presentation that we could have. We have the famous donut with planetary boundaries in the outer circle and social foundations in the inner circle. So the company should aim for between the outer and the inner circles. And in that case, the company respected its social foundation, but slightly exceeded the planetary boundary and climate change. So this is our first prototype, and it might be improved in the future. To conclude, I wanted to share with you how this experiment helped us and what we learned about our model. First, we achieved to account for physical flows integrated to financial accounting entries. It was really important for us to account for physical flows first, as it is for us necessary for companies to achieve a true internal transformation. The aim of this experiment was to know if physical flows could be tracked in accounting, and it is possible thanks to our extended chart of accounts. Then we understood that the notion of the budget was at the heart of the determination of the performance. That is why we want to base the calculation of budget on internationally accepted standards for each topic. Data collection is the main challenge we all need to face, whether there are new internal data to collect for the SMEs or external data to obtain from suppliers or other actors of the value chain. And finally, in our model, monetary conversion is optional, which means it is not the way we account for the environmental and the social, but it is a way to translate and communicate the result to a certain range of actors talking in monetary terms. So we reached the end of my presentation on the 3 case studies, and we will now have some time to listen to the directors to share their thoughts on this experiment. So I will stop my sharing and I will ask a first question to the directors of the SMEs. First question, can each of you share with us why, firstly, did you engage with the chair project? I don't know who want to jump in first.
Mathilde,
Okay.
go.
Yes.
Hi, Mathilde. Thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, very good.
Okay. Well, first of all, it was natural for our group to join and contribute to this project, as our innovation director, Olivier Papin, worked with the chair already on previous projects on carbon footprint. And for our company, which is in transformation right now, it was essential to transform in the right direction and incorporate in our daily monitoring indicators that are essential to our employees and to the planet, because our employees and customers are looking for meaningful actions from us. We advise our clients, and we must apply to ourselves what we advise our clients to do.
Thank you very much, Mathilde. Nicolas, do you want to?
Well, for us, it is a little bit like for Mathilde. We are a consultancy, so for us it was very important to demonstrate that it was possible for a very small company operating in a very challenging environment, Myanmar, one of the poorest in the world, that it was possible to embrace good international standards and also to start accounting for what was not accounted previously. And for us, it was how do we talk about, and this is something that you discussed in the previous discussion, how do we talk about value? How do we translate our values into value? And so it is something which is extremely new here, because basically you can ask your financial auditors to produce the financial statement you want to have. You can negotiate with your tax officer the tax that you will pay to the government. And so for us, it was extremely important basically to walk the talk on those questions and to demonstrate that we were able to do it, and that if we can do it, there is no reason that other companies, organizations couldn't follow our lead. And so that's why we decided to do that. And maybe also because it was something which was mentioned before. I used to be a sustainability consultant, and I am still a sustainability consultant. And today, as the owner of the company, as one of the board members, it was also important for us to understand actually what it meant for us as owner of the organizations to translate those things in our financial statements, in the discussion we had with the different shareholders, but also with our team. When we can put and when we can discuss with them about how do we make decisions, and when they realize that we value those elements, actually it is a very powerful drive to sustain the transformation of the company and to basically build up the culture of the organization. As a consultant before, those things were totally far from my understanding, but as an owner of a company, I know actually that it is actually where the value of the organization is. The ability of the team to understand what we stand for and to translate it operationally.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, for your comments. I don't know if Didier, you want to jump in?
Yes, with pleasure. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Didier.
We are a company heavily involved in social and solidarity employment, working in the reuse of waste. We reuse pleasure boats that we transform in different other accommodation on ground. And we've got also have to earn our money with no subsidies. So we've got three economy mixed: the economy of solidarity, the circular economy for the West, and the profit economy to make everything, all those economies working together. Our goal is to try to share with a good equilibrium the social, the West and the environment part of it, and the profit. In the 19th, we've met an organization called Zero Waste Alliance in Berkeley, students working on how to fight against a project with 300 incinerators to burn the waste and trying to find other solution. And we were already trying to work on those subjects to kind of find a way to monetize the positive externalities of our action. In a circular economy model, implies by nature the creation of an ecosystem of public, private, and citizen organization to create and share value together. And for us, it's essential to have a kind of multi-capital accounting to organize that and to share in the best possible ways the value organized together. I don't know if my English was so good to explain that, but I've been trying.
It was perfect.
Maybe if you can turn your video on for the future questions that we can see you. Unless
sorry, but I cannot control it.
Oh, really?
It's okay if you can't, but if you can, you have a small video and you can, people can also see you, but that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Thank you so much for your answers on this first question. One second question I have for you is what is accounting for you and how can it help account for sustainability according to you? I don't know who wants to go first.
Well, accounting for us is, in theory, a process of recording financial transactions, so basically. But we discovered through these experiments that we could record something else than just the financial transaction. So we are used to monitoring indicators, but we discovered with you the fact that we could maintain an accounting of something else than financial transactions. So to us, that was new, clearly, and that was interesting to apply the same principles of accounting to other indicators than just financial transaction, but also physical events, physical and HR events and data. And so,
Thank you so much.
How it can help, obviously, as Nicolas said previously, it materializes in like a very a more scientific way, things that are intangible otherwise, or not reflected in a constant and consistent manner through different companies. So it has the advantage of setting like a norm, and so that we can compare ourselves to other companies, and it's important for our employees, our stakeholders, and everybody around us. So that's what we took from this accounting experiment.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. I don't know which one of you want to go
Please
first.
go ahead, Didier.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I said it before, how to share value created by an ecosystem of multiple partners, working on environmental pillar, on a social pillar, on a profit pillar is something very difficult to do. We have been working on that with the University of Nantes, who's got specialized in those model of circular economies, which are complex. And for us, the capacity to account what we do on environment, account what we do on social, we could, how do you say that, be bankrupt on the social part of it, or we can create with wellness and share it in the network of partners is really something important. I don't understand how we could do some circular economy without a multi-capital accounting.
Thank you so much.
Maybe for us, so because we, as I said before, we wanted to lead by example. So for instance, in Myanmar, we are the only B Corp certified company. And for us, actually, it was not necessarily the accounting which was important. It was more the notion of accountability and to be extremely clear about, okay, we are doing stuff, there are impacts, and we need to own it. And we also are very conscious about the complexity of the environment. And again, we need to own it. And so for us, actually, everything started with this notion of accountability. And for us, it was obvious that if we wanted to streamline the organization and to focus the organization on what matters, we had to start with that. And then actually, it was easy to translate this into the accounting itself, because, for instance, if we talk about the CO2, before working with you guys, we had that idea of being as neutral as possible. And so we started to work on those topics before. And actually, I was quite interested to see that without working too much into the SBTI tools, we were not too far from what we should reach. And that was interesting because we had a discussion about, okay, how much should we pay actually for the debt we have with the CO2? And so it was something which was quite interesting because in Myanmar, it helped us also to build up and to connect with other parts of the country, and also to reinforce the feeling of solidarity within the team and also with our stakeholders. So it was very important to start with the accountability and then to translate it in the organization using different tools.
Thank you so much for your comments, all of you. It's very, very interesting. I have another questions. Maybe you will repeat yourself a little. I don't know, but what are, according to you, the advantage to use the advantages of this type of accounting for you? And eventually, what would be for you the main challenge to face using this type of accounting?
So maybe I can start this time, because working in Myanmar means that we had to deal with a coup d'etat 4 months ago. And so when you have to deal with such extreme conditions, you need to have your people trusting you at 100%. And so basically working on those topics before such extreme event helped us tremendously to navigate the complexity of the challenges that we are dealing with right now. And so for us, it is definitely, and so I told you just before that instead of accounting, what mattered for us was accountability. For us, actually, the key outcome of this kind of work is basically that you are building trust. Internally, externally, and that you are basically fit for purpose and fit for extreme conditions. So it was clearly for us a very clear outcome. And when you have to discuss with your employees that you may have to cut their salary by 50%, you really need to get their trust clearly established, because otherwise you are dead. Yesterday we had a flood, 10 centimeters of water in our office. If you don't have your team, despite the 50% cut, fully committed, everybody came in to support us and to help us to manage a mess. So basically, for us, actually, the direct relationship with those things is trust building.
Very inspiring. Thank you for the sharing of experience. I don't know if Mathilde or Didier want to add comments on the advantages or the main challenge. I don't know if Nicolas didn't answer this part of the question, but we can jump in after. Didier, we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
See me now. You can see me now.
Oh, yes, good. We can see you too.
For us, it's always very difficult. For example, we reused old boats, pleasure boats, which cannot navigate anymore, and we transform them of different kind of accommodation on the grounds. We sell it to the camping people. We sell it to citizens to put in their garden. We sell it to companies to make a co-working room, for example. Those boats help us to serve our social activities, to take people far away from the employment and to in our métier, which are wood, metal, composite. How do I give a value to that, to, for example, a collectivity like a région in France, you know, which is in charge of the West? So they will understand what is our activities on the West part, but how can I also monetize? I don't know how you say monetize in English.
Monetize.
How can you monetize all the other value made by our action in the circular economy? To give them a number, a value of money is very interesting, because in the model of circular economy, you spend your time sharing and exchanging things, and to put them in a global accounting system with multi-capital will help us to measurize it much more precisely, if I may say so like that.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments.
As to us, I mean, the advantages are similar to what Nicolas mentioned earlier. For us, it holistically reflects the activity of our company, so it's also similar to what Didier said. It is one of the only way to really have a comprehensive view of our impact, and it's key to keep our people motivated. At Nepsen, if we present just financial objectives to our people, they just run away from us. Basically, if you tell them our objective is to reach, I don't know how many millions and how many number of people in a few years, they just run. They hate this. That doesn't speak to them. While if you tell them together we'll contribute and we will have an impact on whatever energy savings and therefore on financial health of the residents, because we refurbish residential housing and sometimes in very difficult situations, not as difficult as in Myanmar, but sometimes the social housing are in very poor states and people suffer from poor lodging. Therefore, if we can positively have an impact, that will motivate our people, and that is why they wake up every morning, right? So have a positive contribution. Now, as to the challenges to put this in place, we are getting better at organizing ourselves, and we are implementing an ERP, and therefore the project was at the right time for us to implement in the ERP some of your indicators and also some of your conversion factors. So we're not there yet, but at least we have that in mind. And our objective is to put this in our ERP and also to automate as much as we can the capture and the tracking of all the physical events. Automate travel expenses declaration and scanning, automate scanning of vendor invoices so that the tool can recognize in the vendor invoices the quantity, for instance, etc. Because we cannot afford having more administrative people to just to complete, the key indicators and the monitoring of all this. It's not financially viable for us. So, but the right thing is that with our modernization, the implementation of our ERP, scanning tools, and also the fact that in France, we are going towards electronic invoicing in 2023. Progressively, all this will be easier and easier. I mean, capturing data will be easier and easier. It's not yet simple, but it will improve.
I may add that if all the companies do a multi-capital bilan at the end of their years, it will help us to choose who we want to work with. I would never work with a company which is in, for example, social faillite. And therefore, if we were all doing that, it will be a marvelous way to choose our partner and to build our partnership.
Yes, of course. And we need some companies to start using it. I don't know, Nicolas, if you wanted to add something on this, or I have some time left. I wanted to know what surprised you, or what did you learn during this experiment, exchanging with us on those different topics, if you wanted to share something with the audience.
For us, we are a small company, and we do realize that our invoices must be much more well organized, because it's an important tool for you to calculate the impact of environment, all the things. So it's an organization we've got to put together. But when you're talking about an ecosystem of partners, as I said, on the logic of circular economy, the difficulty is that all the partners should organize their accountability, their accounting on the same way to really have all the results you can give us. It was really interesting to see the type of result you can give us. I regret that I wasn't organized much more well organized to give you all the data you needed to do it.
But it was necessary to to know the reality of the SMEs. You are a well representation of different SMEs we could have using this tool, and it was incredibly interesting to have those so different case studies. So don't be sorry. I don't know if Mathilde or Nicolas, you want to share something with the audience regarding this?
Maybe one comment from my side, and this is actually, it will echo some of the questions asked in the chat. I remember when I worked on integrated reporting 10 years ago, 11 years ago, on one of the first projects with Delphine. And so it is interesting to see that it took us 11 years to be where we are today and start talking about how we talk about value. So because it is extremely complicated, and it was extremely complicated. And it is interesting to see and to observe now that there are more and more traction on those topics, that there are more and more interest from different stakeholders, and that I hope that, as Didier said, it would be good to see if instead of having huge company pressuring us SMEs with different things, if we could agree on something to demonstrate that we are all working on the same direction, trying to create value, social values where we can, trying also to assume our responsibility and to create a common platform, basically to be more accountable together. And so for me, this is quite interesting to see that it takes time to change. Just before you had the questions about should we take straight away the value for 2030 for the CO2 budget. And I think that actually the key word for all of us is actually managing change. And this is actually extremely complicated. And I do believe that this is where actually we need to work more closely together. And I really appreciated the work that we did together. It helped us to see things that we were not focusing on. And it helped us actually also to realize that we were not where we have to be if we want really to deliver things.
Thank you so much for your comments, all of you.
Yeah, same comment here. I say what surprised me was that time flies. Huh? So our last carbon footprint for our own company was dated 2015. When you asked us, we said, oh, we did it not so long ago. And in fact, oops, we did it 6 years ago. So it should be really central to our daily organization, daily life, how we live, how we deliver, how we grow our company. And here we are, not setting the example. So that was one really key. And so the fact that we implement such multi-capital accounting, as for financial accounting, it becomes part of our daily, monthly processes. So we can't miss it. It's just part of the way we work. So that was the benefit of this project to us, and the surprise also to us.
Thank you so much.
May I say something?
Yes, of course.
I am convinced that our humanity, especially with the crisis we've been through, the world crisis, the next steps are going to be the right of the human and the right of the nature. And I don't understand how we could do that without models like multi-capital to help us to organize that again. So it's a huge advances, I would say. I hope our commerce people are going to bound us to give them the 3 lines at the end of our bill every year, because I don't understand how we could do something efficient without such data. Therefore, thank you, Audencia, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Chair. And I hope you're going to convince a lot of people to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Eugénie, maybe we can take a few questions from the audience.
Yes, of course.
And there is a question for Nicolas and Mathilde and Didier about the necessity to discuss the future set of sustainability reporting standards adapted to SMEs that Europe is planning. Guessing you've heard about it. There is a part that will be for listed SMEs and a voluntary standard for SMEs. If you have a comment on welcoming that initiatives and how do you see this new progress at the European level? Maybe Nicolas, you can jump in.
I do believe that it is again, the trend is positive. For us, the reason why we set up our KPIs, that we structured everything, it was not actually to comply with something which might one day become a standard for the EU. But the reason why we did it, it was very simple. It was because it made sense to us. Because actually it helped us to talk about what we wanted to become together. When we started to discuss with the chair a year ago, we were just in the middle of COVID, and it was for us the best time to start thinking about how do we project ourselves in 2030. And so we come up with different goals, objectives, and actually it proved to be essential when we had to deal with the coup 4 months ago. Because when you know where you want to be, it is easier for you to adapt and to adjust. So I think that for SMEs, it can be a good way for them to start thinking about what does it mean in terms of data processing, what does it mean in terms also in terms of priority? Because if you go back to what I said before about the accountability, it will help you to focus on what matters. And once you know what matters, it is easier to start accounting for it, start reporting for it, and then start using it within the organization to empower people and to foster the decision making. And again, I hope that multinationals and also the public sector as well will use those tools to foster a new type of economy and to foster the transition from an old model toward a more sustainable one.
Thank you very much. Mathilde, Didier, do you want to jump in or?
For me, I am really convinced that I want to do something on the local territory, you know. When you create take people far away from employment, it's to do it on your territory. So I like the way you could help small companies on a territory to organize themselves around what you said, and maybe with the help of state department or collectivities, which could be capable to gather all those information, because the local territory is a very important. I am not going to be international. I'm not going to be national. I'm going to be regional. This is what I want, and this is the idea of our company. So how, if we do the efforts of doing a multi-capital company, how could we organize that so it could go further away in the international system, all of that? I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure you will find a way. Maybe big company could help us to also organize that, because it's heavy on our shoulder to do all the stuff together on our small territory. But small territory with multi-capital company, I think, could be so efficient.
Mm.
Yeah, I have a similar comment as Didier, as we are too small to influence, even if by implementing it we can at our level influence, but we want to continue to work with you, as for us implementing multi-capital accounting is also an effort, so we will invest time into it. And we would be happy if there is convergence between the multi-capital accounting developed here, and also we know you have your entries at European level, so we're glad for this, and we're happy to see that you can influence, contribute, receive feedback also from the European level, and also create the link with the governments. And as we exchanged by emails recently with the new platform launched by the government, impact.gov.fr. So for us, we will make this effort, and we will be happier if things converge. Because, well, once we have the discipline to work with multi-capital accounting, we can switch models and ways of presenting it, but it's even better if things converge for us.
About 10 years ago, communities, public services, how do you say appel d'offres? I forgot.
Call for tender.
Sorry?
Call for tender.
Voilà. Tenders, collectivity put in their tenders some points if we were a social company. It'd be a good idea if one day in their tenders they give points because we've got a multi-capital company, multi-capital accounting. I think things like that will help us at a small local level to belong to the family. But why not? Because they'll have all the tools to judge our impact on the environment, on the social basis, and obviously on the profit things as well. So that's something really try to put to to make local public services in their tenders to put a multi-capital and points with it. That'd be fantastic for us, and that'd be a good motivation to do it, and not that difficult.
I've got good news. It's not for SMEs, but a lot of the rankings now for larger companies are starting to give points for multi-capital accounts. So this is ongoing. I'd just like to answer some questions that are a bit more general, and this goes back to something that Nicolas said, because we met working on integrated reporting 11 years ago. And there were questions about the influence of integrated report and TCFD and the announcement of the new work on nature financial disclosure. But what I'd like to say is there are two things. There's a piece that is more technical, and there's also an influence of those large bodies of work, which is more social. I've always considered maybe those two elements, integrated reporting, TCFD, as elements that have allowed the financial functions, what we call in French the profession du chiffre, everyone working with numbers, to actually move forward. I think the shift started 11 years ago with the CFO networks around integrated reporting, and the TCFD has even more encouraged people working in accounting to deal with it. I have, and I think all types of work and bodies of work that have been ongoing in this area have their own plus and minuses. They have advantage and disadvantage. But what we can say that socially, we would not be here today with CFOs talking at the kickoff of our conference this morning if those large bodies of work would not have meant a lot for the finance function to start working with us. And there were questions. Sorry, there's loads of questions. We're already kind of at the end, but I wanted to address questions. Maybe Nicolas, you can jump in about. Sorry, I'm just going back to the questions about human capital. There was, I'm trying to find it right there, is a question by Cécile about how we have been working on accounting for investment on skills. Maybe we can jump in on what we did and what we plan to do.
Okay. This is one point for further improvement of the model. As a team, we have been through some training by social metrics specialists. We have also somebody who is specialized in social metrics who is going to join our team. But already we have been working on some of the social foundations, such as the living wage and training requirements. So we have been thinking about what it means for a company to respect, for example, a social foundation that is linked to education. And we looked at the question of training and how training is carried out, not just for the company itself, but to preserve an individual's ability to carry on working and evolve professionally. And then we looked at what the company does, should do, what would go towards increasing the individual's ability to carry on with a professional career and to improve it. What would be the minimal number of hours to be done, and not necessarily something that can be translated automatically into hours. So we have been debating on a qualitative basis a number of issues linked to the social foundations, and our objective in the medium to short term is to translate this into metrics and to sort of detail the thought processes that we went through. I don't know if that's the beginning to answer the question.
Yeah, and I know we've passed the time, but I'd like to answer a few more questions. There was a lot of debate on what is positive and negative accounts and whether we net or not net within the chat. I'll just like to say that we have a PhD coming in September working on what we call positive accounting. We know that it's something really hot on the plate of organizations to kind of know what is value creation. This is something that we will work specifically and then attach to the model that we've built in the first year. There has been questions about whether the case study would be made available. So yes, they will, and the case studies are ready. We are making a few tweaks here and there. They should be online within the next week. And then one last question is about how are your next steps in terms of spreading your LIFT models across the world? This is exactly what Eugénie is now doing. Eugénie is our first PhD student in the center. We have 2 more joining in the summer. And Eugénie's task, after having been essential to building the experiment that she just presented, is actually to develop the spreading of the tools. So, and specifically for SMEs and small and medium-sized companies, she's going to be working on this until the end of the year. The goal is to make it approachable with training, with a toolkit, with a software and presentations that will be made available to you all. So maybe, Eugénie, if you can put your last slide to announce and close this conference, announce the next one now, please.
Yes. I am sharing back my screen. Just a few seconds for my computer to be able to process.
And thank you so much, Didier and Nicolas from very far away, and your conditions, and Mathilde for being with us today.
Thank you to you.
Yes, thank you so much for to the of you for sharing all your thoughts and comments. It was so interesting. So I have So I just have a few seconds to tell you. So we are currently working on a guide and a toolkit of templates for SMEs to help them use our LIFT accounting model. We also work our IT partner to develop a software based on our Access tool, and we are preparing training sessions for accounting professionals that would like to use this tool. So thank you so much for your attention, and thanks again to the speakers for their availability for this session. In 15 minutes, Richard Jabot will come in more details on accounting on planetary boundaries and social foundations with Bilbao and Geoff Kendall. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.